All right, so when we say nutrition consultation, right, what we mean is like we're going to be working as sort of like nutritional counselors. Okay, so we are that's more commonly referred to as like a nutritionist. Okay, so our role is to sort of help people gain the confidence when it comes to making like effective dietary changes, right? Like you'll notice like what this says, it's about helping people get the confidence to make dietary changes. We are there to assist someone to start eating healthier properly, right? That is different than saying like I want, that is different than telling them what to do and like or even or doing it for them or anything like that, right? Our job is to sort of encourage people to adopt healthy lifestyles. Now, obviously, some people are out there and like they can specifically be like, hey, I wrote for you a meal plan that I want you to stick to every single day. Like for instance, in like most of the NFL, like most NFL teams, most NBA teams, like a lot of professional sports will have dietitians on staff. And there's a difference between a dietitian and a nutritionist. So a dietitian is a medically trained individual. They had to do nutrition school, but they also had to do like a residency the same way like a doctor did. They had to like work in like a medical setting for a certain amount of time in order to like, pass their license, right? So they have like a certification in nutrition, but they also have a license in nutrition and they have a degree, right? Like all of those things have to be maintained. The degree is good forever, but like, they have to maintain certifications, they have to maintain licenses. Whereas like nutritionists, right? We are going to be, fitness nutrition or not, no, certified nutrition coaches, right? That's the CNC certification. That's part of your tuition. You're going to have that certification, right? But it's a test that you're allowed to take at home, which means that it's open book. You can Google stuff if you have to. You can look it up in your book if you have to. And you take it one time and you just have it forever. So it is really great. It's something that you can add to your resume. It definitely means that you're going to know more about nutrition than the average person. But without that very strict, like every 2 years, new dietitians have to renew their license. They have to do continuing education units the same way that we do, right? As fitness trainers, right? As personal trainers, CPTs, every 2 years we have to do new educational materials and recertify our license, right? That's true of dietitians. Nutritionists don't have to do that. And so because they don't have to do that, there's no there's no government regulation of like what's going on with them. So what that means is, and this is I'm going to get very technical with this sentence. Technically, nutritionists don't exist in the eyes of the government. So they're not going to be protected by proof of, they're going to be protected by proof of knowledge or proof of like practical experience. Like if you hurt someone as a personal trainer, somebody like, let's say I sprain their ankle or something, because that's a simple example, right? They sprain their ankle and they're like, oh, well, the trainer was making me do something. They sprain it's really bad. They got to go get like surgery or something to fix it, right? Like it's a grade 3 tear, because they tripped over something in the gym. And they're going to try to blame it on you. And by the way, this is never going to happen. I've never heard of anything like this happening, but let's say it did, right? Well, what's going to happen is like, if they're trying to sue you, you're going to go up and you're going to present your case and, a judge is going to look at it and they're going to be like, they're going to look at you and they're going to go, are you a fitness expert? And you're going to go, yeah. And they're going to go, all right, well, prove it. And you're going to show them your NASM certification. He's going to see that it's current. And it's like, well, you're clearly an expert. This company wouldn't, certify you if you weren't an expert in this area. And then they're going to look at the other person and be like, look, accidents happen. This person knows as much as anyone about exercise. So if you got hurt, that's out of their hands. Now, if you weren't able to prove that you're an expert, like let's say you didn't have certification, right? Well, then what can happen is like, they're like, well, yeah, you promised to do this thing for this person, and then you put them at risk because you don't know what you're doing. And you could be like, no, I study exercise every day. And it's like, prove it. And like, he's not going to listen to an anatomy lesson that you give him. They're just going to go, well, I don't have any proof that you're an expert. So like, I think you put this person at risk because you don't know what you're doing. And all of a sudden you're in trouble, you know? And that's why we need to be certified. Well, the same thing is true of dietitians. Dietitians have to have their license, they have to have their degree. Nutritionists, we are certified, and it does enhance your resume. It is something you can tell your clients. You can call yourself a nutritionist, right? These are all like things that you can do, but that is why we have a little bit of a stricter rule set to follow than a dietitian would, or at least we have a smaller circle of things that we are allowed to do. So for instance, we can also write meal plans for people similar to dietitians. But the difference here, if we read what this says over here, for instance, is our job is to assist in gaining the confidence for making dietary changes. Our job is to lead our clients to make their own healthy decisions, not to make those decisions for them. Like a doctor can prescribe you medicine, right? Well, that's great because they have to stay in school. They got to do all kinds of stuff. They got to know about medicines, right? We are definitely allowed to say, hey, like, you know, you can improve like a lot of your health problems through like diet and exercise and stuff. And we can prescribe push-ups and squats and things like that. But what we cannot do is say, like, if so, there's like a supplement out there or something, right? Like somebody's got like heart problems, and we know that omega-3 fatty acids are really good for like heart problems, right? What we can't do is say, hey, I want you to, you know, buy this brand of fish oil, and I want you to take 2 of these every day. That is outside of, like, a doctor can do that, right? They can tell them specifically what to do. What we can do is we can say, you know what? There is a lot of evidence that suggests that like omega-3 fatty acids are really good for your heart. We know you have heart problems. Let's take a look and see if there's like an omega-3 supplement that maybe you want to incorporate into your diet, or maybe we can find a way to get more fish into your diet, or maybe we can, you know, if you're vegan, we can go like flaxseed or something like that. Let's find a way, you and I, to do something that you like, that you can make the decision on where it comes to increasing your omega-3 output, because of all of this evidence that I know about that is going to help you make that decision. That's the key difference here. So when we're talking about consultation today, I want you guys to think about it as how we are encouraging people to make healthy decisions without telling them, you know, like a dictatorship. We're not making them do anything, right? And so we encourage this term right here. You're going to see this term a lot next mod, but we're seeing it today. We call this guided self-help. Okay, it's like it's kind of similar to how I approach homework. You know, again, I'm a trainer at the heart of who I am, which is why like the teaching probably feels more like a like a coaching experience sometimes, more than it feels like what you're used to in school. But like, you know, I could say like, hey, get your freaking homework done 8 hours after I, you know, put it up there, right? I put it up on Canvas and I expect you to have it done 8 hours. Anytime after that, it's late. But like, that doesn't give you guys the control or the practice of like getting your ish done on time, you know, and like building those healthy habits of like, you know, maybe sometimes it is like, oh, I gotta do my client billing, but also I'm busy this week, you know, and so it's like, you know what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get to it on the weekend. And it's like, I know I should have done it. I said I was gonna do my billing every month on the 15th, but I'm gonna wait till the 17th, which is a Saturday. I got a whole bunch of stuff. Like, it gives you the flexibility to live like the way you're gonna live out there in the world, you know. So like that is where it's like, hey, try to, you know, don't get yourself get behind on your homework. You get too far behind, you're gonna be struggling when you have to do all of them all at once, you know. Not that you can't do that, but like in my opinion, that sucks, you know. So the advice that I give you is like, yeah, try to get it done as quick as you can, and that also gives you more time to practice it. And I incentivize, you know, you practicing it by ensuring that like we put the averages in. So like there's a lot, it's like we're trying to clear the path to what I think is the best way to approach things, because in this case, I'm the expert, right? That's exactly what you're going to do with your clients. You're trying to clear the path and be like, look, this is the thing you want to achieve, and this is the best path forward to it. You know, and they're like, well, what about this supplement? I want to take the supplement. It's like, look, that's on a different path, and it might lead to the same location. I'm not saying that won't work, but I am saying like I have just opened up a tried and true area. I'm not making you walk down that road, but I highly encourage it, right? That's what we call guided self-help, okay? I always like to say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. We're not describing like a stubborn person when we're using that phrase. Instead, we're like just making it very easy. And it's like all the things, bright neon signs that are saying like water right here, but similar to Arlene, your cat, right? Like we're not dunking your cat's head into a bowl of water. That would not go over well, right? Like you're gonna end up losing an arm if you do that. But it's like, hey, like look, I've put bowls of water everywhere for you. It's we're doing everything we can to sort of guide them and let them make the decisions. So there is going to be like a lot of nutrition assessments and nutrition professionals out there. Honestly, the only two that are actually like allowed to straight up prescribe specific meal plans and things like that and tell people what to do are doctors and dietitians. In the nutrition industry, that's it. Both of those are going to require extensive degrees, right? Nutritionists, we are going to encourage people, and we might, there's times where like I've got a dietitian friend. There are times where like, there are things where I'm like, hey, what about this? And she's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. And then she'll like look at that. I'm not saying you're not going to know as much as a dietitian, but I will say like legally you won't be able to prove it. And that's why it's important to stay within our scope, what we call scope of practice. It's the ring of rules that we have to stay within in order to make sure that we don't ever put ourselves in like a liable situation. And for the record, guys, chances are you're going to step out of that ring at some point by mistake. I'm sure that I've done it hundreds of times. And I've never gotten in trouble. I've never hurt anybody. But, the more you're aware of it and the more you try to stay within the circle, the more you're going to, and so that means that like, you're gambling in a much better way. So registered dietitians, again, a medically trained nutrition practitioner with a very specific licensing and their own scope of practice. By the way, dietitians are allowed to tell people to get more physically active, but they're not allowed to build someone a workout. They're not personal trainers. They're not experts in fitness. They're experts in nutrition. It would be wildly inappropriate for them to tell someone to do 3 sets of 20 push-ups, but it is well within their scope of practice to be like, hey, I found this workout on the internet that my clients have used before. I really like it. And this could be a really good way for you to get more physically active. And they can hand it to their client and be like, look, this is a good one. As long as they're not saying, I want you to do this 3 times a week. That's the key difference, right? They're not prescribing it. They're guiding someone towards activity. In the same way that we're not prescribing food, we are guiding them towards healthier decisions. So registered dietitians are going to determine calorie, macronutrient, and micronutrient goals. Again, that's the prescription part of things. They can aid in the meal planning and cooking tips. We're actually allowed to do that as well. We can do that one. We can help people be like, look, I mean, I don't like salmon either, but I did find a recipe that I do actually really enjoy a lot. If you wanted to, I'll give you the recipe. Maybe you can try that. They are allowed to create hydration schedules. We are not necessarily allowed to do that, but we can tell people how much water they're supposed to drink in a day according to the FDA guidelines. 3.7 liters a day for men, 2.7 liters a day for women, right? We can tell them that those are the standards that everybody sort of follows. And then we could even say like, so honestly, if you drink 4 of these bottles a day, you'll be in a good spot. And then that's not necessarily a hydration schedule. We're not prescribing it, but we're guiding them there, right? And then obviously, they are allowed to address like health-related nutrition questions specifically to that. I don't like the way this is written, but specifically to like that person. We are also allowed to do something similar to that. We are allowed to talk about the health-related effects of certain nutrition, right? Like we're definitely allowed to be like, look at someone and be like, hey, let's do a food journal for 7 days, bring it back to me and we'll analyze and see if we can figure out why you don't feel so great. And then like we look at their diet and we're like, oh, we're seeing a lot of sugars in here. So the recommended amount of sugar for someone of your age and size and stuff would be like this many grams, but you're clearly getting this many grams, which is a lot more. You might consider lowering your sugar intake and it might make you feel a little bit better. Here are some really good complex carb options instead of simple carbohydrate options, which are, you know, what you're sort of partaking in. So we are allowed to like look at their food and realize and like try to figure out like why they don't feel so good. What we cannot do is say like, oh, this is what's causing your diabetes. That is well outside of our scope of practice, right? That is exactly prescription. like, oh, Joseph, I see what you're doing here. That's what's causing, you know, your diabetes, right? Like that would be an insane thing to say, like, because there could be genetic factors at play. There could be all kinds of other stuff. There's obviously blood tests that doctors are going to do to figure that stuff out. We don't have access to any of that. So yeah, we know high sugar can lead to diabetes, but to say that that is definitely what's causing it in one of our clients, wildly inappropriate. So let's talk about like how we can actually do a consultation though. So now that we have a pretty clear idea, hopefully we have a pretty clear idea of the difference between like prescription and self-help, like guiding, or a difference between like prescription and counseling or coaching, right? Let's take a look at what we need to do in order to do this. Now, this is going to look the same as our regular personal training stuff. Actually, this whole call, all of you guys have been with me in other classes before, so we've talked about this before, right? I always like to lay this out: personal training in 3 steps, right? We got 3 steps to being a good, effective personal trainer, right? Any training relationship starts like this. So the first step, step 1, is going to be we need to gather information, right? So we need to gather information before we are able to then solve the problem, right? So we determine the problem by gathering info, and then we solve the problem. Now, when I say solve the problem, a lot of people think that's like, oh, the problem is gone. That's not what I mean. What I mean is I'm generating the solution. I have the solution. I haven't implemented it yet, but I have it, right? And it's like, oh, you don't exercise enough. Oh, you got too much sugar in your diet. Oh, too much saturated fat in your diet, right? Like we've analyzed it here. We've made the decision of how we're going to fix it here. And then step 3, now we implement the solution. That's personal training in 3 steps. It's like, I got shoulder pain. Really? Right? Let's go do a shoulder assessment. We check their range of motion. Oh, yeah, you got a real severe lack of range of motion, most likely from overactive muscles here, 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 and here. So best thing to do for that overactive muscle is to do this stretch. Best thing to do for that underactive muscle is to do this strengthening exercise. Build it out in the program. Problem is solved, right? Now, all right, let's set up a schedule and I'll see you on Mondays and Fridays. I want you to do your homework on Wednesdays and do it on your own. That's our schedule. So 3 days a week, we're going to be addressing those tight muscles and those weak muscles, and we're going to fix your shoulder over time, right? That's the implementation process. We identified the problem through the fitness assessment and the interview and all that. We solved the problem, we wrote the program, and we implemented the solution over our training sessions over 6 weeks, whatever. So same thing is true of nutrition, right? This is going to actually follow the exact same process. So first thing we need to start with is that gathering of information, right? So we need to do a consultation where we're going to do an assessment, right? An assessment is an opportunity for you to really figure out what's going on with your client, right? So we want to get a very clear idea here. So first, we're probably going to start with, like, if you're really being strictly hired for just nutrition, you need to get their contact info. You need to do a health history questionnaire and a PAR-Q, right? Those should look familiar because we've talked about those in our other fitness assessment classes, right? That's the first stuff that you want to gather right off the bat. And then a list of any current medications or supplements they're on. And then if they happen to have it, a food log or a training log. And if they don't have it, that's okay. We can encourage them to develop one. The assessment process isn't always done in one day. You know, sometimes it's continued observation, right? So all of that information gives us insight into our clients' like diet and activity. And then once we have that information, we can solve the problem. We can come up with a plan. before we start to implement that plan in step 3. So the diet history, right? There's a couple different versions of food logs that you guys are able to incorporate into your sessions. The first and most common of all of them is going to be an actual friggin' food journal, a food log. Class survey real quick. Do any of you guys use MyFitnessPal?
Yeah.
Yeah. You log all your food on there?
If I can find it, yes, because there's some things you can't find and you have to guess. So it's hard sometimes.
Yeah, you got to make your own thing. Yeah. So yeah, it's a really helpful app, right? That's a food log, you know. You are able to kind of go back and you can look at all of them. Heck, I don't even know if maybe there's a way to even print it all. I don't know. But like that is the food log, right? Like you have a very clear thing. Now, the classic example of this before, you know, used to be like a food journal, right? And so you would basically just be like, all right, you wake up and it would look something kind of like this. Let's see here. Come on, give me an example. There we go. Oh, well, yeah, that works. So breakfast was at 7:30 a.m., right? They had a veggie omelet and a decaf coffee. Their hunger level, you know, they recorded that. They recorded their hunger level before, their hunger level after. They recorded how they felt before, how they felt after, and then, you know, any other night they were like, oh, I had a bad night's sleep. And then lunch they had like chicken quinoa salad and an apple. And then they haven't had dinner yet. This is blank for the day. But so it's a food log in process, right? So a lot of different ways you can do food logs. I think this one's very detailed. You can put a little bit more emphasis. You can tell that one has a little bit more emphasis on like the emotional side of food, where they're like, how do they feel before? How do they feel after? And that's fine. But not everybody necessarily needs that. Some people it's just like, I don't know, like I don't have a problem with food, but I don't know why I'm having trouble losing weight. Maybe they just don't understand calories, you know, maybe they just don't understand portion sizes. And it's like, well, let's take a look. It's like, wow, you know, like my parents are like that. My parents, this is so adorable, but also frustrating, will occasionally do this thing where they send me pictures and they'll be like, look at this healthy meal that your mom made, you know, like, and it'll be like a healthy meal. And I'll look at it and I'm like, you know, like, because like I always tell them, I'm like, look, you want to have like a starchy carb, you have some greens on your plate, or at least some bright colors. And then you want to get like a leaner cut of protein, you know, whether that's like lean chicken or whatever. And my parents will be like, look, this lean food, and it'll be like a lean cut of like steak, you know, like, which is like lean looking because they cut the sides, you know, the gristle off around the outside of the steak, but it's like still has just so much fat trapped within it. And then it'll be like, and like its portion size will be like, it'll be like that much of the plate, and then like a little tiny thing of like broccoli, and then like a big thing of mashed potatoes. And it's like, they listen to me. They got the starchy carb, they got the veggie, they got they got a protein that they consider lean, right? And it's like, you know, like sometimes that's what happens with your clients. They're like, look at how healthy I eat. And you look and you're like, you know, how many calories do you think are in that? And it's like, I don't know, probably 200. It's like more like 700, you know, like that'll happen every now and then. So that's why we do food journaling. Food journaling is great, guys. It's one of the best tools you've got at your disposal. So you're going to just record their dietary intake. It's a good way for you to also get a view, like a look at their habits. Again, that story, The Power of Habit, the book I was talking about, the way he kind of realized is because like they had like their daily meeting, because it's a newspaper, right? So they had this like big daily meeting where everyone comes together and like talks before they head back to their desks and stuff. That was where he would like pick up a cookie like on the way there and on the way back. And if he had food journal, he would have realized it a little bit more quickly. He would have seen like every day at 9 a.m. I ate this freaking cookie, you know, and then at 10 a.m. I ate another one, you know, on my way to and all on the way from my desks. And so like, okay, great. Now I've got a very clear idea. So it's like, if I want to get that cookie out of my diet, I can rely on willpower, which, for the record, we will talk more about this next mod, but never works. Or I could rely on, you know, creating a structure in place that's going to kind of help me. And so like, you know, take a different route to get there, even if it is less efficient, you know? So food logs are really, 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 really great tools. They can help you understand like your clients' eating behaviors, what their habits are, and even their exercise patterns. Like that's the one thing that food journal we just saw was lacking. I didn't see any slots for exercise or activity in there. And generally in food logs, you want to also include however many minutes of exercise you get, what time you get it, and what it was. You don't have to write down your whole workout or anything like that, but it's like I did upper body day, 65 minutes, something like that. It's a great way to just record your activity. So usually these come in the form of like a 1-day version, like you can do that. It's good, it's not incredible. A 3-day version, which is much more helpful, or my favorite, which is like a 7-day food log. And so if you're able to do that, you can get a really clear idea. I like the 7-day because it incorporates the weekends, and if you incorporate weekends, you're going to see like how people's habits change once, brunch is an option. So it gives a very objective view on like foods and gives you an assessment of sort of like what their general intake looks like. So, oh, good Lord, yeah, that's right. I'm actually jumping ahead just a little bit. I need to go back just ever so slightly. So that is, that's a diet history. I thought that was food log. So diet history is also something you're going to get during your fitness assessment process. So that's part of the sort of first initial assessment. We also have health history questionnaires. We do want to know about our clients, like health problems, if they have any. Diabetes, multiple sclerosis, osteoporosis, whatever it happens to be, right? Ask about supplements. Actually, anybody in here take like supplements? That includes like a multivitamin or fish oil pills or probiotic or anything like that. Anybody take anything? Whey protein? I'm assuming most people in here probably use some version of like a protein powder. Whoop, we got a quiet radio silence here.
I can't do protein. It makes me sick.
Oh, really?
The
Interesting.
protein powders always upset my stomach.
Oh, wow. Don't love that. Well, everybody, we all probably take like a little bit of something, but again, we want to know about it if our client's taking it, because like sometimes those supplements have like certain health effects, right? So for instance, like a lot of guys will take like pre-workout. You look at pre-workout supplements, right? Like C4, that's so freaking popular. This was sold at Costco. Is this still sold at Costco? It was so popular for so long, but there's just so many different popular brands out there. And a lot of this, some of them are like BCAAs, some of them are just straight up caffeine, some of them are electrolytes, they're all a little different. But if I had a client who's like, yeah, I just don't get very much sleep, and I look at their food log and then it's like, well, I take pre-workout. It's like, what time do you work out? It's like, no, like 9 p.m. It's like, are you taking pre-workout before you go to the gym? And they're like, yeah. And it's like, what time are you trying to go to bed? It's like, well, I don't know, try to get in bed by midnight. It's like, so 3 hours before you're trying to go to sleep, you're gonna take pre-workout. That's why you're having trouble sleeping. I'm not gonna say that because again, we don't medically solve things, but it's like, pre-workout has been shown to like keep you physically awake for up to like 8 hours, right? Like, I don't know, so definitely ask about their supplements, guys. Definitely something we want to know about. Because like, the necessity of supplements, whether or not you're looking at them and be like, I don't know if this is doing you any good, you could probably save $20 a month. Is like looking at like what their vitamin and mineral content is, looking at what their omega-3 content, how much fiber they're getting. Like you look at their food log and you're going to be able to kind of like determine a lot of that. So like I said, there's a couple different versions of food logs, right? There's the food record, there's a food journal. That's either 1, 3, or 7 days. And by the way, you can do whatever you want. You can do 4 days, right? Like these are just kind of the classic examples. Gives you an idea of what their eating patterns look like. Now, that's not super practical during like a first nutrition consultation. Like the first time you meet somebody and you like, well, let's say they like come in for a fitness assessment, like they sign up for a new gym membership, right? And then, with that gym membership comes a free 1-hour fitness assessment. And you come over, it's like, great, so we're gonna do our fitness assessment. And they're like, you know what? Like I kind of I'm really just here to use the treadmill and stuff. And for the record, like this happens sometimes where you're like, well, yeah, there's better things to do than just the treadmill. But maybe they don't know that yet. And so the way that you can sort of like, latch on and get them like interested is like, well, let's talk about like, it's like what I'm really here for, the reason I want to meet with a trainer is I'm really much more interested about like the nutrition side of things. Great, you're a good fit for that, right? Everybody in here, because you guys are going to have a nutrition cert. So you're like, okay, great. Well, let's go do a nutrition consultation rather than a 1-hour fitness assessment. That's okay. You are more than allowed to do that in gyms, guys. So you sit down. They didn't know they were going to need to come in today and talk about their diet. They haven't been doing a food journal, So what you can do instead is sort of an alternative, what's called a 24-hour dietary recall. And basically, this is going to have you go back. You're going to work your way backwards for the last 24 hours to get an idea of like what they consume, right? There's some drawbacks here. Obviously, it's not going to be as accurate as a food journal because like human memory is pretty freaking flawed, There's probably going to be some things they're forgetting to include on there. They didn't really pay attention to the portion sizes, so it's probably relatively inaccurate, But that's our 24-hour dietary recall, right? It's just going to work our way back. So like for me, for instance, it's like last night I had like, this, we go backwards. I got to start with this morning. I had like my morning coffee and like a little bit of like sourdough toast with like 2 eggs, and I put some butter on the toast, as well as like a bunch of orange slices, right? Because I just had a bunch of oranges laying around, trying to get some freaking fruit on my plate. Go back a day. Like last night, we have like big old ravioli and like, some lean chicken with asparagus. Go back a little further, had like a snack before that, which was not healthy, by the way. The snack was one of those Lenny and Larry cookies because I love those. Not my best on it, but you can see like I'm working my way backwards, right? Until eventually I would get to breakfast yesterday. Before everything was going on. So that is the 24-hour dietary recall. Very helpful for helping you remember the last 24 hours. And now you can get a generally good idea of like what your client's diet looks like. It's not going to work if like yesterday was their birthday. It's not going to work if yesterday was like Thanksgiving, but for the most part, it can be pretty helpful. And then there is an alternative data, or maybe you want to use it in conjunction, is what's called a food frequency questionnaire. So this records how common certain foods are a part of their diet, right? Weekly, yearly. Like I said, if you asked me, do I drink soda regularly? My answer would probably be no. But if you asked me how often I have soda, I would say probably like twice a month, because I usually go to a movie every about 2 weeks, at least during the summer. I guess during the winter, well, it's Oscar season, I don't know. I'd say it averages about to every other week, so that's a food frequency. If you ask me how often I have alcohol, I'd say, I don't know, about the same, probably once every 2 weeks. If you asked me how often I have like baked goods, probably once a week, so like those are low risk like foods for me, but if you asked how often, like, I like to have like red meat in my diet, I really like steak, I have a little bit, they say you should limit that to maybe 1 or 2 times a week. I usually do probably like 3 to 4 times a week. It's a lot, but my saturated food intake is lower in other places. So there we go. So that's a food frequency question. So if you were analyzing like my diet, you'd be like, okay, so sugar is probably not so much a problem. Saturated fat could be, though. Have you talked to your doctor about like your cholesterol? Have you ever looked into high blood pressure? Do you have any of these problems, right? You look at their health history questionnaire, which was also taken before this, right, at the PARQ, and you're like, oh, you don't have any of these problems. Okay, well, that's great. I would say just continue talking to your doctor about these things, make sure they're aware, probably not the big thing like causing problems. So, like I said, we really like food records, right? Food is some way to get it like objectively written down. gives you a really clear idea of like what their short-term eating patterns are like and like sort of what food. So the 24-hour dietary recall, really helpful because it's fast and easy. That's the biggest tool here. Is it as accurate as a food log, like a food journal? Definitely not. Like I would say if I did like a 24-hour dietary recall, I was working with Joseph, who uses MyFitnessPal, but he didn't have the app on him at the time while we're sitting there at the table for some reason, right? And he doesn't have it. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just work back from the last 24 hours. It'll probably be relatively accurate. It's not going to be perfect, but it would give me a really good starting point. So it's a really valuable tool, even though it's not necessarily the most accurate thing in the world, you know? And then food frequency questionnaires are really helpful, especially when you help people kind of come to the realization of what type of foods they eat and how often they eat them. And it's like, do you consider that you have like a high sugar diet? And they're like, no, not really. And it's like, okay, well, why don't you tell me how often you eat foods that would have, you know, how often do you have soda? How often do you have like, you know, these type of things? And they're like, oh, a couple times a week, you know, it's like, or a couple times a day, you know, it's like, now do you consider? And he's like, my God, maybe I do have a high sugar diet, you know? It's great. It's a great way to get people to kind of come to these realizations. So I like food frequency questionnaires. I think they can be really helpful. And then exercise logs. It's like, hey, how often do you exercise? I'm like, oh, I'm super physically active. And it's like, oh, okay. It's like, yeah, I go hiking every weekend. It's like, that's great. Love that. How often do you exercise outside of the week? I was like, oh, I never have time for that. I work at, you know, Monday through Friday. Okay, so maybe not quite as physically active as you think you are, you know? My mom, again, I love to use my parents as examples, loves to tell me she's so active because she gardens a lot. She does do a lot of like gardening. And I'm like, look, gardening is difficult and it burns calories. And I'm not saying it's not doesn't count as physical activity, but it is not the same as like strengthening your core. It's just like I use my core when I'm pulling up turnips, and I'm like, sure, I think that's true, but like it's not the same. You are not training your core for stability. You know, it's like it's because you're focused on, you know, ripping this thing out from the roots and making sure that it doesn't like tear while you're bringing it up. You're not focused on your core. You might be using your core a little, you know. So like it's different, right? People's perceptions of things. And so that's why we really like exercise logs as well. So we get all of that. Now we have a really clear idea, right? Now, obviously, what we don't do, again, is we don't do clinical assessments. We don't do blood work for our clients and be like, oh yeah, you got a whole bunch of liver enzymes running through your blood, which means your liver's working a little harder than it needs to, you know? We don't do any of that. Not that that doesn't exist. It absolutely does. It's just not our area. So there are sort of like, you know, specific clinical assessments out there. Again, our job is mostly to look at people's habits and help them come to the realization that they can make healthy changes. So there's a lot of resources out there. Obviously, like when it comes to the standards for how many like grams of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins, minerals, things like that, you can find those. You can find that information thanks to the USDA. United States Department of Agriculture has sort of helped that. We're going to run numbers against all of those dietary reference intakes that we looked at, right? And be like, you know, or look at the recommended dietary allowance, or if we can't get that, maybe the adequate intake level, which is the bare minimum, remember, of sodium, calcium, things like that. And it's like, you talk to somebody and they're like, yeah, I really don't like, you know, vegetables. And so you're analyzing it. It's like, well, if we look at your food, we look at like, we sort of calculate out like a day's worth, your vitamin C intake is well below what what is recommended by the FDA. And they're like, okay, well, what does that mean? And it's like, well, it increases your risk of certain types of cancers. It could possibly increase, decrease your ability of your immune system to function properly. It's not so great for your skin, And so we just mentioned all these, like, all the things that might be affected by that. And it's like, I'm not saying you are going to have these problems, but we have observed this, when people don't get this bare minimum amount, these are some of the things that have been observed and associated with that. So then they're going to go, okay, well, what do I do? I hate vegetables. How do I get vitamin C in my diet if I'm not going to consume them in my food? Again, guys, our biggest thing is going to say, well, let's see if we can figure out something that you can eat. That would be good. Try to figure it out from a food point. But it's like, if they're like, should I take a vitamin C pill? And it's like, well, maybe I'm not telling you to take a vitamin C pill, but it could theoretically help, you know? So again, we're guiding them there. We're not telling them to take anything. The other thing that you can do, and this is something you guys are welcome to do all day. You can work on this type of recommendation all day, because this is fully approved by literally anybody to encourage other people, because it's just widely accepted as like truth. And that is the My Plate system. So again, encouraging your clients to eat like this, where most of their plate is like fruits and vegetables, a quarter of it is grain, a quarter of it is like lean protein. Encouraging your clients to eat meals like that, right? That is something you are absolutely allowed and welcome to do every freaking day. As often as you want. That's a really great way to eat. So that's going to ensure like a lot of really rich micronutrients, things like that. This is why I like to boil the information down for my clients and say, look, try to eat as colorful as possible. You know, you do that, you're probably going to land right where you need to. So there are obviously dietary guidelines that we have, and we can, you know, compare what do we have in our clients to those dietary guidelines, and we look and we see, all right, that's not so great. So for instance, you can do it based on their calories, right? Guys, you are allowed to calculate calories for your clients. So we have our resting energy expenditure formula here, right? And so like, let's say it's, you know, like I'm somewhere between, actually, I guess I'm falling into this one now, an RE of 11.6 times body weight in kilograms, not pounds. So that's 11.6. What the heck is my calculator? Times, what is it? 79, I think it was 79 kilograms, right? Plus 879. That's pretty freaking close, actually. So my resting energy expenditure is about 1,800 calories per day. That's how many calories I burn by existing, right? So now we got to multiply that by an activity factor. So let's say we multiply that by like 1.6. That comes out to about 2,800 calories. That's probably about how many calories I actually burn on average every day based on a normal, healthy lifestyle, right? Obviously, if I'm living a sedentary lifestyle, it would be less than that, which they don't have listed here because this table is assuming that your client is physically active because they're here to meet with a trainer. So I'd probably multiply that by like 1.2. It's like, okay, if I don't want to gain any body weight and I just want to like live a sedentary lifestyle, I can, as long as I eat about 2,200 calories a day, you know? So there we go. And obviously this goes way up. Look at how high this goes. 17 times 2.4. That would be like on days where, yeah, that's like an ultimate frisbee tournament for me. So yeah, so that's how we do it. We base it on the body weight. It's not bad. This is actually a fairly accurate formula. I don't love the REE formula. My favorite is a different one called the DRI formula. I'll show you guys that one in a couple days or tomorrow. But this is a decent formula that works pretty well, especially for the first part of it. To get your resting energy expenditure, it's really good. The activity factors, I think, 2.4 is pretty high. You have to be booking it to burn that many calories. So then we got our vitamin and mineral intake. We are going to base those, like I said a minute ago, on the RDA or possibly the adequate intake levels, right? The RDA is the recommended amount. The adequate intake is like, okay, well, if you're not going to get that, try to get this as the bare minimum, you know, and that can be based on calories too, right? We just said we can calculate these numbers out. It's like, hey, recommended for you, you know, is 2,500 calories a day. Based on what I'm seeing in your food logs, you're getting like 2,900 calories per day. It's a little more than you probably need. It could explain your weight gain. In fact, it does explain your weight gain, but we would say, you know, like, So that's where our RDA comes in. And so we need to know what the RDA is for our clients, like gender, their age, like what category they sort of fall into. We know kids need more calcium, for instance, because they're growing bone tissue like crazy. We know seniors actually need lots of calcium as well because they're losing bone tissue like crazy. Good Lord. So in our first session, this coffee is like, I put a little bit too much sugar in it. So now it's like hot in my freaking throat, driving me crazy. God. So the initial consultation with our client, first thing we're gonna do, like I said, it's personal training in 3 steps: gather information, solve the problem, implement a solution. So we're gonna gather the information. We're gonna start. Let's do a 24-hour dietary recall. Let's do a food frequency questionnaire. Let's do some type of, let's take a look at your MyFitnessPal. Let's figure out what your diet normally looks like. And then we can sort of assess that. Next thing we can do is we can sit down and be like, all right, so now we know what your current status is. The next part of me assessing is, where do you want to be? Like, I know that your BMI is currently 26.2 because you weigh this, you're this tall. So that puts you in an overweight category. Doesn't necessarily mean you are at increased risk of like health problems right now, but do you want to lower your BMI? Tell me what your goals are, So we're going to get our client to sort of come together with it. They're like, oh no, I just want to get healthy. Right? Okay, great. Like, what do you mean when you say healthy though? I don't really know what you mean by that. And they're like, well, healthy to me means that, like, I can walk a mile without getting winded. I can get up a flight of stairs a couple times, I can do this, I can do that, I can play with my kids. It's like, oh, okay. So like your idea of healthy is like being able to like live a free life without like problems from like aches and pains and stuff. Got it. Okay. Other people, it's like, what do you mean by getting healthy? It's like, well, I want to see my abs in the mirror. It's like, okay, like, great. Like, I love that goal for you. Let's do it, But like, my idea of healthy is going to be different from yours, Little pause here. One of my favorite ways that I've understood what we're talking about here, like we're talking about how like people just have different definitions for concepts. My idea of health is going to be very different from your idea of health. One of my favorite examples of that I've ever seen is actually this by the same people it's by Crash Course, but it's not Hank, it's a different host. It's his brother John. He does Crash Course US history, and he talks about how like throughout all of US history, we've talked a lot about the concept of freedom. Like US is like, it's just built on this idea of like being a free nation. But that idea of what freedom is, that definition for that word, has shifted drastically because that's the most human thing in the world. We all have a slightly different interpretation, right? When my girlfriend and I went to Disneyland the other day, and we rode Guardians of the Galaxy, which used to be Tower of Terror. That is my definition of super fun. My roommate Owen hates the feeling of dropping. So that is his definition of a nightmare. So like, who's right? Nobody, it didn't work that way, right? Like people in this call right now are like, you're right, I love jumping up that. So everybody's going to have a slightly different definition of things, so you got to clarify that with your clients, because sometimes you'll be speaking French while they're speaking Italian, so get a very clear idea, very clear idea of what it is, like their goal, like what are they trying to work on, right? Then we can start pivoting into the nutrition side of things. So you can just start educating there in the beginning, right? So first things first, somebody walks through the door, review the reasons that they are there, right? Be like, hi, how you doing? Like, so what brought you in today, right? That's the same question everybody uses, like every salesperson, I'm sure. Arlene, when you were getting, you were working for that gym that you talk about, I'm sure it was just like, this is what you say when they walk through the door. Hey, so what brought you in today? We love that question. It's a very effective one for a lot of people. Or so tell me why you're here, or whatever, right? We want to figure out like what their reasons are. It's like, well, I'm here because I want to drop a few pounds. Well, I'm here because I want to look good on my wedding day. Hey, I'm here because my doctor made me come here. It's like, whenever you hear that one, it's like, okay, so you don't love exercise. Got it. All right. Like, I can still work with that, you know? Review the reasons they're there, right? And then assess their food intake, right? Maybe food and exercise, and figure it out and see like, okay, well, you know, I'm seeing like, yeah, you like to go on a hike once a week, and that is really good. And keep doing that. We're definitely going to encourage that type of activity, but let's see if we can find a way to maybe increase that from once a week to maybe 3 times a week. You know, the standard recommended amount to be healthy, guys, is about 150 minutes a week. Yeah. 150 minutes a week of moderate intensity exercise, right? So if they go for a hike for an hour, right, that's 60 minutes, right? So now it's like, let's see if we can maybe try to get, you know, 45 minutes twice throughout the week, like another 45 minutes here and another 45 minutes there. Yeah, it's a little bit less of a time commitment, but if we can get you to just go for a walk outside your front door for that amount of time, listen to a podcast, like, you know, maybe even just like have your favorite show on, you know, something like that, you're going to be hitting that 150 minutes per week. And then if we can get you out of breath during those 150 minutes and we move it from the moderate intensity to the high intensity, you get to do it in half the time. You can only need about 75 minutes a week. Now that's enough to see health improvements. It's not necessarily enough to get a 6-pack. It doesn't really address like strength gains, you know, but it's healthy. And that's a lot of what, you know, we're running into. So we start by taking a look at that, and then we identify any of their nutrition goals. It's like, okay, well, tell me about like what it is, you know, you want to achieve when it comes to like, it's like, well, I just want to eat healthier. It's like, great, good answer, except that it's not very specific. What in your brain is healthier? Again, we need to have a clear definition that we both know and agree on. I'm not saying my definition of what is healthy has to be the same as your definition of healthy. Definitely not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that we both need to understand what our definitions are. Otherwise, you're going to be speaking French, I'm going to be speaking Italian. It's not going to translate. So maybe we start by setting like a couple goals, right? And it's like, okay, well, your idea of healthy is that you want to do this, and my idea of healthy is that we want to do this. What's a goal that the two of us can agree on to improve both of our definitions a little bit, right? So the reason we're talking about all this is because, again, the biggest mistake a lot of people make is they have a really hard time adopting change, right? When we tell someone to eat healthier, they're like, great, okay, yeah, I'll go eat healthier. Oh, you probably won't actually, right? Like the problem with that kind of approach is that it lives in the assumption that everyone's ready for change right now, right? Like if you came to me and you were like, hey, you know, Brett, we're going to take you down and we're going to make you the world's best sailor. We're going to make you, you know, you're going to know how to sail a sailboat better than anybody. You can compete in these like around the world sailboat challenges. You know, there's a school down in South America that's going to teach you how to do this. And, you know, you're going to get to live down there for 6 months. And when you come out of the 6 months, you're going to be the world's greatest, you know, guaranteed. If you told me that, like, that sounds really exciting. Sounds kind of fun, you know, like, but like, I got a lot of other stuff going on in my life right now. Like, I'm not really ready to commit to that. Now, obviously, it's a very extreme example, but let's go and take a look at somebody who comes to you and they're like, hey, I want to get healthier. You know, I'm not happy with how my life is right now. And I want to see some improvements in how I look, how I feel, you know, great. Clearly, they truly do want this. And you're like, well, you came to the right place. I'm a freaking expert on how to make you healthier and how to give you more energy. You're going to feel better that way. You're going to do this. You're going to do this, right? All it requires is, let me lay it all out. We make this world's greatest program. It's like, there you go. You got the program. Let's do it. We live on the assumption it's like they're ready right now. And then what we're going to find is like, they're like, well, I do want these things, but you know, I got a wedding to go to next week and I know I'm not going to eat healthy while I'm at this wedding. I don't want to be like that person. So you know what? Let's start just after the wedding. It's like, well, oh, and that's right. After the wedding, yeah, you know what? It's going to be really busy at work because like I get this big project coming up. I'm probably not going to have time to exercise, right? So like all these other things start taking priority. Most trainers, the reason they really struggle, they don't understand that, and a lot of clients, the reason they struggle, they don't understand that not everybody is ready for specific types of change in their lifestyle. I had a student in class one time who was like, we were in nutrition, we were in this class. It was around right now, actually, is when he brought this up. And it was great that he asked, like, I think we got to yesterday's lesson, actually. We calculated all of our numbers and he ran them all for his girlfriend. His girlfriend had been complaining about, how she looked and stuff. And he wanted to like help her, which is really, really, really great. So he was encouraging her to get healthy in these like specific ways. And so he was like, I got my girlfriend a gym membership to the gym that I go to. And he's like, can we work and can we use her as an example in class here? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so we ran our numbers and we came up with a dietary plan and stuff. He's like, great. So I'm gonna go take this to my girlfriend and we're gonna implement it. And I was like, okay, man, good luck, And like what happened was, he a couple weeks later we kind of checked in. It's like, hey, how are things going? And he's like, well, she hasn't really adopted any of them. And I don't get it. Like, I keep trying to get her to come to the gym with me, but she just doesn't want to go. She's like nervous about how, this and that and all these other things. And I was like, so here's the thing, right? You are assuming that she is ready to make all of these lifestyle changes. And the reality is, like, we as people, human beings, we are comfortable in our habits. We like things to be the status quo because change is difficult, it's scary, right? There's a lot of things that kind of come along with it. So not everybody's really ready to adopt these healthy behaviors. So our job as trainers sometimes, or as coaches, is sometimes less about making people do the things that are going to like get them that are going to like meet their goals like right now. It's less about doing those things right now and more about getting their lives structured in a way that they are able and ready to do those things. So this is where we study what is called the trans-theoretical model of change. Big long freaking thing. It's called the stages of change. That's what everybody calls it. That's what's going to be listed in your textbook, actually. And this is going to analyze human behavior, and it's going to understand how we all sort of go through this change. And it helps take away this assumption that everyone's ready for change right now. I was like, look, you are encouraging your girlfriend to do X, Y, and Z before she's done A, B, and C. Right? Like we get her there, we get her to do ABC. Great. She's ready. She's adopted that as a healthy habit. Awesome. Let's do D, E, and F. Let's do, and eventually we're going to get to X, Y, and Z. But like, we got to move through this, right? You had to learn how to do, addition and subtraction before you learn multiplication and division. So the stage of change is going to be broken down into a couple different stages here. Guys, everybody, this is in your regular textbook, and this is some of NASM's like favorite stuff to test people on, simply because I don't know, makes very good test questions because it's a lot of definitions, but also like it is a very important tool to kind of know how to implement with your clients. So the first thing to understand is like when you're looking at someone who really isn't considering changing, right? They're in the pre-contemplation stage, right? Like right now, if somebody was like, hey, we're going to make you a captain of a sailboat. Like, I don't know anything about sailing. I'd be like, not interested. I'm not considering it in any capacity. So I'm in what is called the pre-contemplation stage, right? Pre-contemplation is lacking the intention of making change within the near future. So here's the thing. You're going to find people who are in this all the time, right? I'm sure everybody in here knows somebody. Like we talk about exercise every day in class. That's our job. We're studying exercise. I'm sure everybody in here knows somebody in their life who is just not even thinking about adopting healthy behaviors. They're not even thinking about exercising, right? Anywhere. So we would consider that person to be in the pre-contemplation stage. It is somebody who is not intending to change within the next 6 months, right? If you asked me, am I ready to, what's a bad example? Something I'm really just not interested in. Or no, what's something I am interested in, but in like the near future. you know, actually, here's a really good, I love my girlfriend. She's great. But like, if you asked me, it's like, hey, you ready to like, you know, have a wedding in the next 6 months? I'd be like, no, like, not even a little, not ready for that right now. Like, that's where I'm at, you know? So that's the pre-contemplation side of things, right? Lacking the intention. Now, here's the thing. If it was like, well, guess what? We're going to give you a whole bunch of money and a house to move into. And it's like, suddenly I'm starting to maybe think that, hey, my life is a lot more stable. Maybe I'm able to do this, you know? That's where we start to get into like the contemplation side of things. So the contemplation is like somebody who actually is intending to make a change, but their timeline is within like a next 6-month period. So if you come up to them, it's like, I wrote you the world's greatest workout. Here you go. And you give it to them. They're like, I'm not really ready for that right now. They're just not in a place where mentally they're going to adopt those healthy habits. It seems too scary. It seems too inconvenient. There's a lot of things that are sort of keeping them. They're like, great, I want the workout. Yeah, they want it. Like they think they want it, but they don't want it in here. You know what I mean? That's somebody who's like somewhere in pre-contemplation or maybe contemplation, right? So again, the way they like to test you on these questions, right? Pre-contemplation is somebody who is not intending to change within 6 months. Contemplation is somebody who is intending to change within 6 months. And by the way, 6 months could come and go. How many of you guys have like a goal that you've been working on? Actually, you know what? Really quickly, how many of you guys, let's see, David, how long did you, before, when you learned about Sochi, did it take you to call and sign up?
I learned about Sochi. I learned about it. Then that same day I applied.
So I took a gamble here. How long were you thinking about becoming a personal trainer?
Like a day or two.
My God.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. It took me like 2 days. Yeah, that's what I want to do.
All right. So my gamble did not pay off. Usually what I hear a lot of people say is they go, well, you know, it's like, yeah, I saw the ads for it. And, you know, I've been thinking about training for a long time. Like, and eventually I got enough YouTube ads that sort of pushed me into it. So you had like a 1-day process. That's a split decision, which, hey, that's great. Like you were ready right away. So you started, you know, in this stage over here, you were ready for a big change in your life like that.
Yeah.
Not everybody's ready for that. You know, not everybody's gonna have the capacity to do that. So what'll often happen is somebody will get that 6-month period will come and go. They are intending to change. It's like these are people, like smokers are a great example of this. They end up in what is called chronic contemplation. Smokers are the best example. They're just such a real, like really, they're just such a clear example. It's like somebody who's like pre-contemplators. It's like, hey, you really shouldn't smoke. I'm like, why not? Right? Smoking is great. Have you tried smoking? It's fantastic. Right. Like, and it's like, no, you really should. It's really bad for you. And they're like, it's bad for me. Like, let's say there's the one person on the planet who didn't know. You know, like then suddenly they go from pre-contemplation of like, no, I'm never going to stop doing this. This is my favorite thing. Right. And then all of a sudden you make them aware that like, hey, it's really bad for you. And they're like, what? And it's like, yeah, it causes all types of cancers. It lowers your VO2 max, like all kinds of problems. And they're like, oh my God, why didn't anybody tell me? And it's like, yeah, well, I should definitely stop doing this. And then now suddenly they're contemplating. But then like the nicotine starts kicking in, making problems for them. And so 6 months come and go. And you check back in on this person. It's like, hey, you know, 6 months ago, we talked about like how smoking is bad. Did you stop? And I was like, oh, I've been trying and I really want to, but like, you know, stop for a day or two. And then like, I get a craving. I just feel like doing it again. That is what we call a chronic contemplator, somebody who just continually sort of fails to get started, right? Pre-contemplation, they don't even have a car yet. Contemplation, they have a car that won't start. Right? And chronic contemplation, they have a car that won't start that's been sitting in the yard for 6 months or more. So contemplation is somebody who does intend to change within the next 6 months. Doesn't mean they necessarily always will, but they have the actual intention of doing it, right? Pre-contemplation, no interest. Contemplation, yeah, they have interest. They believe even that it's better to live a life differently. They're just not really ready to take that next step yet. So now we've got people who are in preparation. Right now, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get somebody to start thinking about it. Like we educate them on the dangers of cigarettes. And then if we're trying to get somebody out of contemplation, maybe we show them what a lifestyle without it. And it's like, hey, well, look at how many people have quit and how much happier they are and healthier they are. Let's look at like, what they did. You can see sometimes like pre-contemplators. Sometimes contemplators who are not thinking about changing, the reason they're not thinking about changing is because they just don't see a path forward. They're like, well, yeah, a lot of people did it. Like a lot of people got out of credit card debt. I don't make enough. I don't make enough money. There's no way I'm ever going to get out of this credit. It's the soul crushing amount of debt. It's a dark place to be, and that's often what contemplators honestly are stuck in sometimes. It's like they have these things they want to do that they never do. I want to eat healthier, but I have no idea how to do it. So they get stuck and they just never figure it out. And they stay in chronic contemplation. So one of the best ways to get somebody to move out of that is to show them how it can be done, right? So it's like, well, hey, person who wants to stop smoking, all of these people have succeeded. A lot of them, what they did is they started replacing like their cigarettes with other healthier habits. I had a client who she would always smoke when she was on the phone. That was her habit. Like for some reason, she just liked to be, while she was on the phone, she loved to smoke. And so I was like, hey, from now on, I want you to, and she would keep her cigarettes next to the phone. She had a corded phone. She was very old. And I was like, hey, get rid of that, pack of cigarettes next to your phone and replace it with like a bowl of fruit. And then what you can do is, you grab like an apple, it's got a sticker on it, peel that sticker off, get the stem off, and then take it over to the sink and wash it so you can get some of the wax off and then eat the whole thing. And it's like, why would I do all that? I can just eat it straight away. So yeah, you can, but doing all those other things is going to give you something to do, which will fill your time about the same length as maybe like how long it takes to smoke a cigarette. And so like, that was the big thing that honestly, and that worked, guys. Like she like straight stopped smoking. Like, I'm not saying like my solution is the only thing that like, solved this problem for her, but like, it was a pretty clever solution. And she was like, yeah, that worked really well. Peel a banana, peel an orange, go through these things that kind of take time, about the same length of time. So what we can do, I'll tell a story like that to somebody who's in the contemplation stage, who's stuck there, and they'll go, okay. And it's like, well, let's see if we can find your apple. Let's see if we can find your solution. So then they start really thinking about it. They were already thinking about it, but now they start to take small little actions that put them in a place where they're starting to get structure ready. And in like the next 30 days, for instance, they're going to take action, So preparation is people who are actually intending to make a change within the next 30 days. This is where a lot of our clients, our new clients, come from. This is where like a lot of people who are walking through the gym are people who didn't ever think about exercising, who then maybe they start getting more and more health problems, with more and more aches and pains, or just being unhappier and unhappier with how their life is currently structured. So finally they got to a place where they're like, I gotta take action. So they showed up to the gym. So you're gonna get a lot of people who are like in this preparation stage of things where they're like, I'm ready, I'm here, I want to do something within the next 30 days, like big, right? So this is a huge vital step, because often what happens is if it's too difficult, people will fall right back into, yeah, I want it, but I'm not really ready right now, right? So how do we do that? How do we get people moving forward through this? We remove all of the obstacles we can for this person, right? That's like, I want to eat healthier, but I don't know how. Great, here's how. I want to eat healthier, but I just, it's hard for me to bring food to work. Hey, these are some meal prep containers and a cooler that you can bring to work with you, right? I want to eat healthier, but I just don't know how to like cook properly. Here's some healthy recipes. Like we just remove as many obstacles as we can. I want to exercise more often. Great. I look at your schedule. Guess what? You got 20 minutes in the morning. Get out the front door and go for a 20-minute walk. Whatever. Here's an at-home workout. Here's a set of resistance bands you can buy on the internet. Here's a TRX suspension trainer you can get online, right? Whatever. We're going to remove as many obstacles. When they're a preparer, we're trying to get them to the main, our sort of main in stage here, which is action. Action is somebody who has made specific changes. Now, this is somebody who's made changes. They haven't necessarily maintained it for a super long time yet, but they have made some like small changes in their lifestyle. My mom adopted some healthy like walking behaviors recently. I was like, great, she's in the action stage, right? What I am worried about is her falling. We call that lapsing or relapsing. Lapsing is like temporarily falling back. Relapsing is like fully you're back in your bad habits. I'm worried about like that. So now all I'm focused on as her trainer, right, is to make sure that like she keeps pushing forward. So like when she calls me and tells me she's like, I went for a 10-minute walk, because that's about all she's capable of right now. I'm like, great, that's awesome, good job. How's that 10 minutes feeling? She's like, feels really good. I'm like, is it easy? And she's like, it's not quite easy. I'm like, okay, great. Well, let's see if we can get to a place where it feels easy. And I am definitely going to have a conversation with her once she can do that 10 minutes, where I'm like, all right, let's aim for 15. I am pushing her down the line. The further away she is from inactivity, you know, she can fall back a little bit without falling into inactivity again. Right. And so the further we push our clients on, right. And it's like, hey, you adopted the 3-day-a-week workout routine. You want to consider, let's do 4 days a week, right? Or like, hey, you adopted this healthy eating habit. Your meals are very colorful. Let's start talking about portion sizes. You know, that's keeping someone in the action stage. Now we're continually moving them forward. And then eventually they end up in what is called maintenance. So maintenance is like somebody who's actually made substantial changes in their life and they've maintained them for like 6 months. They're less at risk for falling back into old habits. You know, when you were a kid, your parents probably, just like mine, I hope I'm right about this, but your parents probably struggled to get you to brush your teeth, I imagine. You know, they struggle to get you to go to bed on time, they take a shower, like do all these things that are like important parts of like human being life, you know, like so your teeth don't fall out, so you don't smell bad and get, you know, bacterial infections, right? And so you get enough sleep so your freaking brain grows properly, you know. I'm sure every, you know, that's what every parent talks about, is just like, oh, trying to get my kid to go to bed, you know, like because kids, all they want to do is they want to focus on the here and the now, the fun stuff that's directly in front of them. They don't really see the benefits of these long-term healthy habits, but eventually you've done them so often that you're just adopted them, you know. I don't think about brushing my teeth anymore. It's the first thing I do when I wake up, you know. I used to have a really hard time getting up in the mornings because I was like a morning trainer, you know. I was up at 5 so I could be at the gym by 5:30 first session, you know. Luckily I lived very close, so 30 minutes was enough for me to shower, brush my teeth, and get out the door and get to the gym. And it was hard, man. It was hard getting up that early. So what I would do is I piggybacked one habit with another. I took my toothbrush. I you know, I had like an old Nokia brick phone at the time. So I would take it and I'd leave it, you know, in my bathroom. And I would take my toothbrush and I would put it on top of my phone. Now that we know more about phones and how bacteria, oh, disgusting. Should have done that, but probably got a couple colds because of that. But I keep it there. I wake up in the morning and I'd have to turn my freaking phone off, and then my toothbrush would be right there, and so I would just grab it and throw it under the sink, and then it would wake me up, and I'd be like, all right, cool. Ugh. Hop in the shower, get out of here. You know. Now I've been doing it for enough years, not really a problem anymore. But like that's what I had to do to sort of get me to a place. I piggybacked one habit onto another. Now it's maintenance, you know, I'm not really at risk of, you know, falling back into those old habits. Eventually you end up in termination too. Now this termination bit isn't really part of the stages. You don't see it in every way. This is going to be presented a lot in a lot of information. You don't see this one all the time, but basically termination is like, yeah, you're not really at risk of falling back into old habits, like at all. You know. So any questions on any of that? How do you guys feel about the stages of change? Arlene, I think you might be the only person who's actually seen this already, but everybody else, how are you feeling about the stages?
Pretty good, interesting stuff. Just
Yeah.
like different things for different people because everybody's like at a different stage in their life. So not everybody's just ready for the change. Some people are, some people aren't, and it's just about getting them ready for that change.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Doesn't it seem kind of crazy sometimes when you're like, there's so many gyms in the world, there's so many outdoor parks where people can work out, and yet obesity is something we struggle with. We all know how bad smoking is for us. We all know how bad drinking is. We all know how bad like all these foods are and that we should all eat healthy. And yet there are just lots of people who just don't do those things. It seems kind of crazy sometimes. But then I look at myself and I'm like, I know that I should be doing these certain things. And like, I just oftentimes I don't have the willpower, the effort, there's just reasons I have for not wanting to do them.
Yeah. Some people just don't care. It's as simple as don't care. They don't feel it now type thing,
No.
They don't feel it now. So they
Yeah.
don't care right now.
You think you're the
But they'll care
exception,
later.
right?
Okay.
That's a classic one. It's like, I know smoking's bad, but like, I'll probably be fine. Ugh. So, all right. So once we've kind of sat down, we've kind of helped, we got to analyze where our client is in the stage of change. Because if you try to like use the wrong tools for a client based on what stage they're in, and it's not going to work very well. It's like, hey, I wrote you the world's greatest program for a pre-contemplator. They're gonna be like, I don't care. You're like, no, this is the greatest workout program in the world. They're like, yay, I don't really care, like, but you give it to somebody who's in like the action stage and they've started like adopting those things, they're going to be stoked, right? And that's going to get them into maintenance. So you got to make sure you're using the right tools for the right clients. One of the tools that we have that's really great are setting proper goals. Goals work really well for clients who are in the contemplation stage, where they are starting to think about like adopting some changes. When you turn these like big, like it's like, I want to lose 100 pounds. That seems so daunting and almost impossible. And it's like, okay, great. Well, let's start by, setting some goals that are going to get you there. Like you can get, losing 100 pounds is not going to happen overnight, but what will happen overnight? Like if we start adopting, I want you to try to get like 15 walks in for 20 minutes at a time. And I want you to try to finish those 15, like a punch card style, and you get a free latte, I want you to get 15, 20-minute walks in the next, and we give them like 30 days. So all they have to do is go for a walk every other day. They break that down. They're like, I can do that. And like that's achievable, right? So then like that's the right type of goal for that type of person. So helping people make goals is sometimes a big part of getting people to move forward. So let's talk about some goals, right? We are going to talk so much more about goals next module. But here's two very simple types. So there are outcome-oriented goals, and there's also process-oriented goals. So outcome-oriented goals are the ones that you often hear people say. They are the goal where the end result is like achieving a specific thing, such as like, I want to lose 10 pounds. That's an outcome, right? I want to have a six-pack, in the mirror, right? That's an outcome. I want to be able to run a marathon. That's an outcome, right? They're good. I like outcome goals. They are a really good tool. I'm not against outcome goals. But another type of goal that you can blend in there, which will make sticking to your habits and goals like a little bit more effective, are what are called process-oriented goals. Process-oriented goals are like, let's say somebody wants to run 26 miles. They want to run a marathon, right? That's an outcome. A process would be like, okay, if you want to learn how to run a marathon, like let's try to achieve that. But why don't we focus on like getting you just to start like running regularly, like 3 to 4 days per week, right? So now the goal is like trying to improve like a process, right? So rather than like somebody saying, I want to lose 10 pounds, we say something like, I want to include more fruits and vegetables into my diet. And then the best thing you can do is have both of those things listed as your goals, which is why we like having multiple goals at a time. I have these goals of like, these things that I want to do. And sometimes the best thing I can do is just work on the process. It's like, it doesn't have to be finished tomorrow, but if I can work on it every single day, eventually I'll be done. That's like how studying works. When you're studying for your NASA, right? The outcome is to pass the freaking test. The process shouldn't be to be able to pass it after your first day of studying. It should be to like, all right, I'm going to read, one chapter. I'm going to try to finish one chapter every 2 days, until I get through the whole book. And then I'm going to go back and, I'm going to lay out all the definitions, get all the definitions in the book memorized. I'm going to try to memorize like 5 a day. Those are processes that are going to help you, right? And then the outcome is get every definition in the book memorized. The process is, doing it consistently. So when we implement both of those things simultaneously, it is like freaking, jet fuel on flames in terms of like helping your client stick to what it is they're trying to do, right? It's a lot better approach to goals rather than just like, I want to be healthier, right? I want to look better. I want to feel better. It's like, what do you mean? What is healthier to you, right? Let's get more specific and let's translate that want into actions, So there's a lot of different ways we're going to be able to do this. So we can impart knowledge through conversations. Obviously, we have a lot of conversations in class and stuff. We can clarify misconceptions. We can myth bust, which is really good. That's a great way to provide education. It's like, I heard this was healthy. It's like, maybe, but there's not a lot, just educating, very helpful. And then we can even hand out sample meal plans. Guys, you are absolutely, if you had like a 3,000 calorie meal plan, if I had a client who told me they wanted to like put on some weight and like gain some muscle and stuff, there's no reason I can't be like, cool, let's take a look at this. Wow, that is exceptionally pixelated. This is not clearing up. There you go. Here's a 2,700 calorie meal plan. Very good example, right? I'm not telling my clients specifically what to eat, but they asked me what a good 3,000 calorie meal plan would be. And I laid it out and gave it to them. I can absolutely do that. I'm not prescribing a meal plan. I'm giving them an example. So we're going to do all of that. We can sit down with our client in that first session, this first couple of nutrition sessions, right? We gather all the information from, we gather all the information from them through like health history, PAR-Q, things like that. We maybe get like a food log, and then it's like, that's their first goal, right? Their first goal is like, hey, I want you to have a 7-day food log. There's the outcome, right? So the process is like every day, I want you to make sure you're keeping your food log with you and you're checking it. If you drink something, if something goes into your body, I want to know about it, right? I want it to be written on that food journal. So now we have our first goal with our client. So we're going to start with all that. We're going to lay out our first session. And then a good thing to circle back to, guys, is summarizing everything at the end of the consultation. So you're working with this person for that first hour, and you're going to give them the opportunity to ask any questions that they may not have asked. And then you're going to try and say, okay, so we are going to meet again on Monday, and we are going to analyze your food log. That's going to be 3 days from now. So I want to see 3 consistent days within that food log. Again, we've already talked about this. I'm just reiterating it so they remember. Your appointment's at 9 a.m., right? And I want you to start thinking, you can write this down right now. I want you to start thinking about like 3 main goals that we're going to work on. And we'll talk more about those when we get back on Monday. And there we go. Now they've got a little bit of homework. I get to go home and analyze all their stuff a little bit further and plan what we're going to do on our next session. And that's how the consultation goes, right? We're going to review their goals, review what we talked about, and then always, I cannot stress this enough, book the freaking follow-up appointment. Get it on the books. Don't say, I'm going to call you sometimes, and if you're going to do that, first off, don't do that. But like, certainly don't go, all right, and then call me sometime this weekend to set up your next appointment. Do not leave it in their hands. Book that freaking appointment. Yeah. It's just a rookie mistake that everybody makes. Like, I'll call you, or give me a call. So when it comes to that follow-up consultation, you're going to be friendly right in the beginning as they walk back, right? Second session, you'll be like, hey, how are you? How'd it go this weekend? And maybe you knew a little bit about like their favorite sports. Did you see that Dodger game this weekend, right? Build a little bit of rapport. Get to know your client, right? The more they like know you, the more they trust you. The more they trust you, the more likely they are to listen to you. review their goals. Like, so we said we're going to food log. We said we were going to do this. We said we were going to do that. How'd we do? You know, it's like, not so great. I kind of forgot one day. It's like, hey, that's okay. That means we're gonna probably have to like do it again, but like, that's all right. Like, show me what you got, right? Compare how they did with their goals. And then we'll talk more about this in later classes, but you can also start implementing like a system for what happens when they meet their goals versus when they don't, you know? And it's like, if you get all of your walks in, you know what we're gonna do for our cardio warm-up, rather than just throwing you on a treadmill for 5 minutes, we'll go up to the basketball court and we'll shoot around for a few minutes. That'll be really fun, right? And they'll love that, right? And it's like, and if you don't, well, then we're going to do an extra 5 minutes of cardio here. And I'm going to make it pretty rough, you know? That's the gamble, right? And it's like, ugh, you know? We'll talk more about that later. But so assess how they're feeling. Like, well, how'd you feel this weekend? Like, what was it like, on your, this new sort of these new habits you're implementing? How inconvenient was your food like? Did you like it? Did you find it really annoying? Like, what'd you like? What'd you dislike? Break it down for me. Check their body weight, check their composition, see if anything has changed over the last week. Review their short-term and long-term goals. It's like, hey, this is where we want to be. Your long-term goal, you want to lose that 100 pounds. Short-term goal, this month, let's like see if we can lose this many pounds, but like also want to try to see if we can start clearing out the cupboards, to get some healthier foods in there. Whatever it happens to be, like you're gonna have so many unique, interesting goals. And then really quickly, so that's how like a session is going to go. We're going to talk more about that when we get into our coaching class. That's the 8-day class next mod. We'll have a lot of conversations around like what a consultation is going to look like, how these conversations kind of roll out. Any questions on any of that though, guys? Or comments or anything you want to chat about? Just checking in. Okay. Let's talk about some of the weird sessions that are out there. Different sessions are out there. So there's a couple of different other like types of settings. You'll sometimes do group nutrition settings. I used to do this when I taught boot camps. So I would have my boot camps and these were free. They were just like part of my thing, but I definitely couldn't charge for them. We would do these group nutrition sessions where we'd bring everybody in and we would just talk and like, dispel some myths about nutrition, talk about some generally like good things to do. So I'd be like, hey, one of the best things you can do, create a shopping list. Your willpower is exhaustible. They've done these studies where, and I would use this story. They've done studies where they've like had people go shopping and they've had them go shopping for different lengths of time. And they've observed what happens. And what they noticed is you got about 20, maybe 25 minutes of willpower when you walk into a store. And if you are shopping for more than that, what ends up happening is you're like, it's like, hey, I want these cookies. And your willpower goes, no, we're not gonna have cookies. Cookies are bad. It's like, okay. And then it's like, what about cake? And it's like, no, we can't do cake. So it's like willpower, using willpower. And eventually you become depleted. And it's like, well, what about brownies? That's not cake or cookies. And your brain's like, look, I can't fight this anymore. Yeah, go ahead and get them. Happens with kids all the time, right? Like they're like, can we get this? No. Can we get this? No. Can we get this? Sure. That's that's what happens when your willpower becomes depleted. So you get about they've done different lengths. It's interesting. So you know what you do? Go in with a shopping list. You'll be in, you're out, 20 minutes. You're organized. You can do health and wellness fairs. Sometimes you'll be at like a like a 5K or something, and you'll have like a booth set up. Your gym will send you out to places like that sometimes. Or if you're an independent contractor, it's a good place for you to, you're a business owner, like, yeah, go meet some freaking people. Those places are great. You can do like short little sessions. You maybe get some handouts, and you can talk to people, do a little education and be like, hey, if you're interested in more of this, I've stapled my card into this little infographic that I just gave you. Cool. That's great, guys. Sports competitions, that's another one. Sometimes you'll be in places like that. And then certain booths at conferences, like all those, you get these like little tiny 5-minute conversations with people that you're trying to translate into training sessions later down the line. So when it comes to like those short sessions, you don't have enough time to do a lecture like I did today. you know. So try to do maybe a 24-hour dietary recall. Be like, walk me backwards, or a food frequency questionnaire. Those two things are quick. They take 5 minutes at the most. And then determine maybe like what type of physical activity they can start implementing into their life, right? Talk a little bit about like, the type of exercise they like, maybe what many minutes they need to engage in it. And then a conversation about intensity, and be like, just try to go for a walk 3 days a week, 60 minutes at a time, like you get a treadmill, like put on an hour-long TV show, go for a walk 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, something like that, right? If you can do that, in just a walk that's low intensity, it's going to have some pretty big health benefits, and if they're like, I don't know if I can do that, and it's like, okay, well, what about 30 minutes? What about, we're trying to, oh, well, sorry, 30, 75, 3. Oh my God, my brain. Yeah, 30, 60, that's 90 minutes. That's a little bit more than we need. What about 15 minutes, Monday through Friday? Get on that treadmill, get out of breath in 15 minutes, what if you can do that? Can you do that like 5 days a week? And it's like, that I could do. Yeah, I got 15 minutes, here, and I got 15 minutes there. Great. That can have some really positive benefits. Can you jump rope for 15 minutes, get out of breath, go take a shower, get on with your day in the morning, cool. You do that 5 days a week, guys. It has big benefits. It's not enough to meet some intense fitness goals, when it comes to, you're not going to be a marathoner after that, but it will help keep you healthy. And then review any of the information quickly at the very end, and try to set like a single goal, and then give them a call, set up a follow-up session, get them into the gym, and see if you can sell them like a training package, right? That's what happens in these short, little, tiny, itty-bitty sessions. You're probably going to talk to 100 people. If 5 of them sign up, you're in a good spot. It's not actually a bad closing rate. Now, obviously, when it comes down to all of this, if you're coaching someone, if you're training someone, this is still going to be true. All of us got to follow what's called HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. You guys might notice most of my stories involve me talking about some client of mine. I don't say their name most of the time. I'll use the name every now and then, but a lot of times, true story, there are a lot of fake names. It's like John. Like, that person's name was Steve, like that person's name was Mary. But it makes a good story. It helps highlight what I need. I don't want to like reveal. There's a reason this morning, I don't know if anybody knows this morning actually, but I like pulled everybody up. I had on screen share because I was like ready to go. And I was like, oh crap, I gotta look at my attendance. And then I pulled it off screen share. I'm not allowed to like reveal people's grades. That's part of HIPAA, right? Like, all of us have a right to our privacy. Don't share information between clients, right? Be like, hey, Peggy, before you, she, had the same goal that you did. And guess what? She met her goal. That sounds so positive. That sounds so great. Don't reveal your client's information. Just avoid that, use fake names. And that's one thing to be aware of as a coach. I don't know why we talked about HIPAA in this PowerPoint. Well, it's like, I've always felt like that part is like shoved in, but we'll talk more about like that legal stuff in Capstone. That's like part of the like, all right, before you get certified, last thing to remember, don't step in mud. Like, so again, summarizing things, important part of consultations. So healthy diet behaviors, they can be gained through like, coaching, right? That's our job. It can be very sports specific sometimes. It can be very health specific sometimes, or it could just be generally good advice that makes a person who's just going to kind of live longer. All of it is great. Different. You're going to need to use different tools and different people. We're going to need a lot more tools next mod, but this is a good place to kind of talk about this before tomorrow. We're going to run numbers tomorrow. That's one of the tools in our tool belt. So first session, just going to gather information about your client, and then start working on like analyzing that information. Again, we start step 1, gather the info. You go to a mechanic and your car's broken down, they're going to run it through the computer to figure out what's going on. Or they do that thing that's sometimes humiliating, like, what sound is it making? Like, like, I feel like an idiot. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, it's probably a fan belt. Like, they need to figure out what's going on first. That's step 1. Step 2, it's like, all right, well, let's check. And they check and they say, yeah, it's a fan belt. You need a new fan belt. They solved the problem. Step 3, $30. I'll put that fan belt in. That's the implement. But there we go, right? Identify, solve, implement. So make sure, so that is sort of the process we're going to go about. Also, we're going to use the stages of change. We're going to figure out, we're going to assess where our client is in those stages and then make those changes. And then hip at the end. Yeah, don't leak information. And that's it. Oh, we lost Chris. Any questions, guys? Feeling good?
Feeling good.
All right.